There's a tightness that lives somewhere between your chest and your throat. It shows up when you're doing well, when you've set a boundary that actually held, when you chose rest over proving yourself, when you said no and didn't collapse into justification afterward. It's not pride you feel in those moments. It's not relief, not fully. There's something else underneath, something that feels almost like betrayal, like you've left someone behind. Like becoming better means you're also becoming someone your past self wouldn't recognize and maybe wouldn't forgive. This is the hidden guilt of becoming better. And it doesn't announce itself clearly. It doesn't say, you're feeling guilty for healing. It's quieter than that. It shows up as hesitation before you share good news, as the urge to minimize your progress when someone asks how you're doing, as a strange discomfort when you realize you're no longer available for the chaos that used to define your relationships. You might notice it when you're finally sleeping through the night, and instead of celebrating, you feel oddly disconnected from the version of yourself who used to survive on 3 hours and call it discipline. Or when you stop answering texts immediately and someone says, "You've changed." And even though you know that's the point, something in you flinches. The paradox is this. The parts of you that kept you alive in impossible circumstances don't always know how to let you thrive in safe ones. Your nervous system learned to read danger, to stay hypervigilant, to earn your place through performance or people-pleasing or perfectionism. And those strategies worked. But now when you start to put them down, when you start to choose differently, there's a part of you that interprets that shift not as growth, but as abandonment, as if healing means forgetting, as if peace means you didn't really suffer. So you carry this guilt that doesn't make logical sense. You've worked hard to get here. You've done the reading, the therapy, the boundary setting, the slow unlearning of patterns that were never yours to begin with. And still, when you succeed at being gentler with yourself, something inside you whispers, but what about the version of you who couldn't do this? What about the younger you who stayed small so others could feel big? Who absorbed blame to keep the peace? There's a feeling that by moving forward, you're somehow leaving evidence behind that their suffering mattered, that if you're okay now, maybe it wasn't that bad then. And that thought is unbearable because you know it was that bad. You lived it. This is the part no one tells you about healing, that it can feel like leaving your old self behind in a way that's not triumphant, but tender and complicated. Because that version of you wasn't weak. That version of you was doing everything they could with what they had. And now you're here, making different choices, and it can feel disloyal, like you're saying they were wrong, or foolish, or not enough, even though you know that's not true, and growth isn't betrayal. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your body are two entirely different things. And your body remembers who you had to be to survive. It remembers the hyper-responsibility, the constant scanning for danger, the way you learned to make yourself useful so you wouldn't be discarded. Those weren't choices, they were adaptations. And adaptations don't just disappear because your circumstances changed. The guilt shows up in practical ways. You finally stop overworking, and instead of feeling free, you feel lazy. You start saying no to people who drain you, and instead of feeling empowered, you feel selfish. You allow yourself to be happy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. And instead of feeling safe, you feel guilty. Like you don't deserve this ease because someone in your past didn't get it. Maybe a parent who suffered. Maybe a sibling who's still struggling. Maybe just the younger version of you who carried so much alone. And so you dim yourself, not because you want to, but because shining feels like proof that you've moved on from the pain that shaped you. And if you've moved on, does that mean it didn't matter? You might find yourself sabotaging the very things you've worked toward. Not dramatically, not consciously, but in small ways. You get the promotion, but downplay it when people congratulate you. You finally have a healthy relationship, but catch yourself creating problems that aren't there, testing it, waiting for it to confirm what you've always believed. That good things aren't for you. You have a peaceful day and feel restless, like something's wrong because nothing's wrong. Because peace for you has always been the pause before the next crisis. It's never been a place you get to stay. Here's what's actually happening. Guilt, in this context, is an attachment strategy. It's your psyche's way of staying connected to the identity that was built in survival. Because if you were the one who adapted, who endured, who made yourself small or hyper-competent or endlessly available, that became who you were. It wasn't just what you did. It was how you understood yourself. It was your role in the family, in the relationship, in the world. And roles, even painful ones, provide a kind of certainty. They tell you where you fit. When you start to outgrow that role, when you start to become someone who doesn't need to suffer to belong, Your nervous system can register that as a threat, not to your safety, but to your identity. So the guilt isn't really about becoming better. It's about the fear that if you're no longer defined by your wounds, you won't know who you are. Or worse, that the people who loved you in your pain won't know how to love you in your peace. That you'll become unrecognizable. That you'll lose belonging. That the version of you who survived won't have a place anymore. And this fear isn't irrational. Because sometimes when you start to heal, you do lose people. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because the dynamic that held the relationship together was built on your willingness to carry more than your share. And when you stop doing that, when you start showing up as someone with needs and limits and boundaries, some people won't know what to do with you. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. You have changed. But change isn't the problem. It's that they benefited from who you used to be, and your growth disrupts that. And here's the truth that's hard to hold. She doesn't. Not in the same way. The version of you who fawned, who performed, who carried the emotional weight of entire rooms, she doesn't need to do that anymore. But that doesn't mean she's gone. It means she's safe enough now to rest. And rest, after a lifetime of vigilance, can feel like death. It can feel like you're erasing her. But you're not. You're honoring her by finally giving her what she never had: permission to stop. Think about the last time you felt this guilt. Maybe it was when you set a boundary with a family member and they said you were being cold. Maybe it was when you stopped explaining yourself and someone called you distant. Maybe it was when you started prioritizing your own needs and you felt selfish, even though you've spent years prioritizing everyone else. In those moments, the guilt isn't telling you you're doing something wrong. It's telling you you're doing something different. And different, to a nervous system trained in sameness, feels dangerous. Your body doesn't distinguish between different and unsafe because historically, different meant consequences. It meant disapproval, rejection, punishment. So even when different is good, even when it's necessary, your body resists it. Not because you're broken, but because it's doing exactly what it was trained to do: keep you alive by keeping you the same. The cost of carrying this guilt is that you stay tethered to a version of yourself that no longer serves you. You hold yourself back from joy because joy feels like forgetting. You shrink your growth because growth feels like betrayal. You apologize for taking up space because space was never something you were allowed to claim without consequence. And so you live in this strange in-between, better than you were, but not free, healing, but haunted by the feeling that you shouldn't be. You achieve things and immediately minimize them. You experience love and brace for it to leave. You have good days and feel guilty for them, as if happiness is something you need to earn over and over again, as if it's a resource that will run out if you use too much of it. There's also this: when you start becoming better, the people around you have to reckon with their own stagnation. Your growth holds up a mirror, and not everyone wants to look, so they might resist you. They might guilt you. They might tell you you're overthinking, being too sensitive, taking things too seriously. And part of you will wonder if they're right, because you've spent so long doubting your own perception, trusting other people's narratives over your own felt experience. But here's what you need to know. The discomfort other people feel about your healing is not your responsibility to manage. You are not required to stay small so they can stay comfortable. You can't shame yourself out of this guilt. You can't logic your way through it, because it's not irrational, it's loyalty. It's your psyche trying to protect the continuity of your story, trying to make sure that the person who survived isn't forgotten in the person who's learning to thrive. And that's not something to fix. It's something to acknowledge. To say, I see you. I haven't forgotten. You did what you had to do. And because of you, I get to do this now. You get to hold both. You get to honor where you've been and still move toward where you're going. That's not betrayal. That's integration. Becoming better doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It means it no longer has to define what's possible now. It means you get to carry the wisdom without carrying the weight. You get to remember without reliving. You get to acknowledge the pain without letting it dictate every decision you make moving forward. And that's not abandonment. That's freedom. If you felt that tightness in your chest shift just slightly, tell me what part hit hardest. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of clarity that doesn't try to fix you, but helps you understand what you're actually navigating. See you next time.